This is Frontier Opening Bell for Monday, the 26th of July. Of course, the final trading week in the month as we step into August next Monday. My guest in the show this morning, Joshua AfDB, who is the head of banking analysis and research at Vetiva Capital Management. Good morning, Joshua. I hope you had a very great weekend.
Yeah, good morning, boss.
Thank you so much, Joshua. You look at the Pan-African market view, snapshots of the markets as we finish the weekend, with the exception of Egypt, which came back after a very long holiday with 93 basis points on Sunday. The rest of the market finished nice. The Nigerian market was about 2% in positive region. The GSE finished on Friday almost 1% in the green. The BRVM crossed a new level of 167, heading to 170 by 34 basis points, earnings coming through from the Ivorian market. Let's get into East African bourse and the top stories from there. We started Chartered bringing two new directors on board. Centum PLC will be releasing its numbers tomorrow for the full year 2020-2021 ended June. That's going to be a very big news on the Nairobi market. The ride-hailing app Little is planning to ride into Ethiopian markets. Very big market, looking at the size, the population, more than 100 million, one of the most highly populous country in sub-Saharan Africa. Uganda's SEC has suspended the trading in the shares of Uchumi due to some market infractions, and Uganda is looking at $72 billion in revenue from its ongoing oil projects. Joshua, everybody's still chasing crude oil fast and furious. Looks like the East Africans are here to give us a big fight in West Africa.
Well, yes, to a large extent, you're correct that everybody's still chasing oil money. I think because for now, at least for the next decade, I'd say that this is probably the tail end of the crude craze, and by the time we enter 2030 and beyond, I believe that battery technology and renewable energy will have gotten to the point where it will almost be. It will no longer be viable to be digging for oil. So I think that a lot of these countries, especially in Africa, where there's a big shortfall in oil, in dollar income, will just use this money or use this time to really, gather as much as they can. Because this is I think this is really the tail end of the oil boom or the oil craze. So it makes sense.
So everybody's harvesting whatever it can in oil before it goes out of fancy. So what if you can make it at $75 $75 a barrel, you can add it to whatever you have. 10 years is a good time to get it on and perfect it. Very interesting. You have your eyes on the earnings for the across the markets as we start the new week?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we know that most banks will not be releasing that soon. A couple of them might release unaudited half-year results, but we know that the big ones will wait and get theirs audited because they want to release. They want to give out interim dividends. So in the banking space,
just we saw an announcement from Zenith Bank.
Yes, and then in the other,
I think Zenith Bank will be meeting.
You said what?
Please go ahead. The board of Zenith Bank will be meeting sometime in the new month, August. And right. There's a notice of interim dividend.
Yes, absolutely. So, like I said, that would be most of the big banks, and maybe a couple of smaller banks will release their results. But I think the overall sentiment in the market, the indication is that it will still be positive. Q1 was encouraging for a number of reasons. And so far, what we saw of Q2 was also more encouraging. Obviously, there was higher inflation, but other than that, economic activity, was slowly inching up. And so we expect that to translate to positive results. And that has also been the case if you look at the consumer goods space, and even the oil and gas space. We've seen a lot of positive results in those spaces. So that gives you an indication. When all the other sectors are doing well, the banks are probably going to do well as well.
Interesting when you had on Friday, Joshua, which the central bank issued a statement over the weekend that the banks are resilient, safe, and sound because on the back of the latest report. Give me your voice on this quickly.
Well, I mean, this is what I and a lot of local analysts have been saying, that the banks are in a very strong position. But if you look at the international players, if you look at international reports, they've been a little bit more bearish for whatever reason. I mean, they've given out their reasons, but I think we've gone a long way towards debunking a lot of those reasons simply due to the fact that the Nigerian market is very special in the sense that the banks are very, very astute at managing their risk. Obviously, after the whole issues that happened in 2016 and NPLs really shot up quite significantly, a lot of the banks have adopted very different risk management strategies, and those have allowed them to keep their risks at a minimum. Their exposure to risky sectors is still very low, and their overall risk exposure in foreign currency is also, not what it used to be. And that also helps to keep them quite low when we're seeing, multiple devaluations. So I think that they're in a much better position, and definitely the CBN has all the access to all the data. And so if they are saying that they are resilient and they are sound, then I'm pretty sure that that is the case. NPLs have not, suddenly skyrocketed to 9%, which is what some firms are expecting to see by the end of this year. But I think that's very unlikely.
Yeah, I think to back up what you said, it's been a very long journey for them over the last 10 years or so since Lamido Sanusi's 2009-2010 intervention. I think the banks had been whipped around quite a lot. And I think give it to the central bank. I think they've been able to really try to wind down this, to make sure that the system is a little bit more stable, taking a whole lot of issues around them in terms of proprietary trading and what have you, get them to focus on banking and what have you. And I think things have changed a little bit. So let's go on. Let's go with the central bank, but then keep an eye on the external folks who says we should keep one permanent eye open. What's your take on tomorrow's MPC decision at Vertiva Capital?
Well, we're inclined to agree that at the moment, definitely it's pointing towards another whole decision, simply due to the fact that, I mean, based on where we're going with regards to inflation and, the base effect from last year with regards to inflation, and then our FX position hasn't really worsened that much over the last few months. I would say that the CBN or the MPC would probably want to keep rates at current levels, at least until the next meeting, and probably for the rest of this year, just to see what kind of effect that will have on the markets. Because if they start making changes now, not enough time, I think, has passed since their last change, since their last decision. So it's probably likely that they will hold, just to give more time for the policies to, take effect in the market. So it's leaning very much towards a hold.
Towards a hold. Okay, good. I think we'll all listen tomorrow to the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, what he has to say in line with whatever decision is arrived at. AfDB made announcement of selling another 2.75 billion 5-year global benchmark at less than 1%, 0.87 a bond maturing July 2026. The IMF is looking at a 6% expansion in GDP for Cote d'Ivoire, 6.5% in 2021. Nigeria is holding his head around 4.2 or thereabout. Some of these, the Minister of Finance recently, I think that will also may likely come down slightly to somewhere around 3. What's your take on this? Looking at what the IMF is forecasting for Cote d'Ivoire, 6% this year.
I mean, it's quite positive, but then it makes me also wonder why they're so bearish on the Nigerian economy in comparison. Because sure, okay, there are a lot of limitations on our economy in general, so probably 6% maybe is not realistic for us. And also we have to look historically at Cote d'Ivoire's historical growth pattern, whether this is higher or lower, just to give us a better indication. Because obviously Nigeria, we would bite your hand off for 6% growth at this point. That will take us all the way back to the pre-2015 years, quite honestly. So unfortunately,
I think we haven't been able to get it to pre-2015.
Yes.
We haven't been able to go to pre-2015.
I think that it's
Yes.
really the only issues that we have are those of policy and of uncertainty in the market. The truth is that if we want to expand our economy to that point or at that level, at that rate, we need stable government policy. We need
Mm,
stability so that we know, so that international investors know that whether there's a change of power in 4 years or not, the policies will
mm,
be consistent and that
mm.
nobody will wake up one day and just decide to ban, an entire aspect of your business and basically write off your investment,
Mm.
at a whim, at the whim of one or two individuals. That is what is actually holding us back, I think, more than anything else. When you're now adding all the infrastructural development, all those things tie in because the government is waking up to the fact that it cannot do all these things by itself and it needs international investment, it needs international money to come in and
I
concession,
agree.
projects. That is what will
I agree.
attract investors and that is what will drive growth. Unfortunately, no
I,
no investor is going to come in and put in hard currency to make those projects
yeah.
happen because they know that if
Mm.
there's a change of power, the entire investment can just be written off. So that is really what is
I
holding
agree
us
with
back.
you.
That's
There's
it.
quite a whole lot on our political governance front as well, because we look at the style of leadership of the current administration. Will that continue from 2023 onward, when
Right.
President Buhari will no longer be in office? I'm sure that's going to be a whole lot of. Now we're seeing the office of the vice president taking a whole lot of chunk in terms of business and economic. Will the next vice president be working around with the same passion and whatever it is? So I think there's a whole lot of uncertainty around our governance process and whether what is currently ongoing will be on, even if you have the same ruling party continuing in power or you have a change of political party in power. I think there's a whole lot of uncertainty, and I think investors are all marking that down against us in terms of forward-looking investment decision making. I completely agree with you. We have a whole lot to deal with. But let's talk about Southern Africa, where they're still counting the cost of that 1 week of massive unrest, losses, total number of stores vandalized and looted, more than 1,000 in number. The insurance folks are coming in, the rates are impacted. But it looks like the vaccine is here to, we're getting the first batch of that 400 million units. How that will be distributed, we'll get a whole lot more details on that. Telkom shares slipped on Friday on the news that Maseko, the CEO, will be stepping down next year. And Angola is proposing 230.5% export tax to curb smuggling. Is it good news to you, Joshua, that we're getting more of the vaccine from this week? And do you see this as economic uh, stimulus, in a manner of speaking?
Absolutely, especially because it's the Johnson and Johnson vaccine, which is the one-shot vaccine that I personally have been very excited for and I've been waiting for. Because obviously this means that's 400 million vaccines. Technically means 400 million people will be immediately, inoculated against the virus
Vaccinated,
and
yes.
will be able to
Mm-hmm.
move about a little bit more freely. Obviously, you'd still be encouraged to practice social distancing and wear a mask and all that. But at least the risk of severe infection, the risk of hospitalization will be significantly reduced, which will reduce the strain on our already strained healthcare system and the African healthcare system. Now, how much of this vaccine will Nigeria get? I don't know. I hope it's a whole lot of doses. I do hope that, a lot of the countries that have been severely hit, across Southern Africa and Eastern Africa as well, will get a significant number of these doses. But like I said, the Johnson and Johnson vaccine is really what I think should be targeted towards the African market because it's a one-shot vaccine and you can get it into as many arms as possible, as quickly as possible, and let people move, start getting back to full capacity at least, hopefully,
Yeah.
by the end of this year.
I agree. I think I tend to agree with you, because for in terms of our structure of logistics, infrastructure, whatever in Africa, a single dose vaccine will be the best for us. Just get and go, get and go, get and go,
Right.
get and go. The next, and you just inoculate, and you say next guy. But to ask folks to come back after 3 months to take the second injection, you can be sure you're not likely to get about to 60% or of that of those
Yeah.
who got the first dose, because folks will say, "Hey, I think the first one is working. Why do I need a second one?" By the way, and off they move. And again, if you consider the type of our economy in which a lot of in businesses, our economy is in the informal economy where people travel by road across borders and what have you, and do a whole lot of things, to get them to come back again to queue in 3 months to get a second inoculation is going to be a tall order. So I think the global space should begin to look what works in every region. For example, is that for Africa, a single dose would just be fine, like you get for every other virus or bacteria, and everybody just move on and say fine. But see, as I said, keep social distancing, the whole protocol. On a final note, on the North African corridor, Egypt is back in business after a 1 week out on the long holiday. So, raising fuel prices but keeping diesel unchanged, that sounds very familiar. Morocco's current account deficit down 62% or thereabout for the full year. They're making some good trend there. But again, Tunisia, Carthage is cement improves half-year revenue 61%. Political unrest and protests in Tunisia as we speak over the weekend. From all news, it looks like the council of the government has been relieved. The prime minister may also have been relieved of his position. It's all developing story in Tunisia right now as of this morning. Finally, with you, Joshua, fuel prices, even in Egypt, whatever you do, it looks like this is here to stay.
Well, yes, absolutely. I think, like I mentioned, it's now becoming ever more apparent to us because I don't think until recently never really paid attention to the correlation between crude price and how volatile fuel prices can be. I mean, especially in Nigeria where it tends to go in only one direction and only after a very long period of time. But obviously, the cost of refining crude, the cost of transporting it, the cost of land clearing it, and all these things impacts the price. Obviously, the Egyptian government probably their structure is very similar to us in the sense that the government probably has a direct, say in the price that the products are sold on the market. But for
Yes.
whatever reason, I doubt that their diesel demand will be anything close to ours, simply because I think their power generation is probably more stable, and so they probably
Yes.
rely far less on diesel. So I think the bigger impact would definitely be felt in the fuel market. Obviously, relating that to Nigeria, you wish that we had the refining capacity because that would help us to maintain a stable, price regime. Whatever the government says they want to sell it as, they will sell it at, and they know that they're not losing dollars in the process. The reason why this entire thing is a problem is because it costs dollars to bring in petrol products, and you're not making that money back, and you're subsidizing it for the people. Unfortunately, we have gotten our priorities, all wrong. I think the Egyptian economy is even in a much more stable position to handle a rigid price control than we are. And unfortunately, that is bearing itself out. But definitely, whenever you look at Egypt, I wish that we would follow the Egyptian model more than any other country, just because they've had the same issues that we've had, but they have managed it far more efficiently and far better than we have managed to over the last 10 years, let's say. And that is really frustrating.
You're quite on point. It's all a whole lot we can learn from the Egyptians. But again, political stability and political direction in terms of being correct with governance and what have you, and having a unified purpose is another thing. Because some of the things that tend to work very well for you has to do with the governance structure. If we begin to tend towards tribalism, whatever, tribe, ethnic, whatever, here and there, before we make appointments, before we decide on what policy direction, before we decide where infrastructure is placed, when we take all of this into consideration, we're bogged down by so many things that we can't move at the speed of light. at which we need to do reform, structurally speaking, within the economy. It takes so long to go for projects to go through cabinet, to go through ministries and MDAs before you start looking for the fund, before you put it on the ground. Exchange rate inflation had made nonsense of it. And you can't even do simple things. Look at Lagos Ibadan Expressway. We're now looking at end of 2022, according to NSIA Chief Ucheoji, as the time for completion. That means you've had this that particular highway, which is Nigeria's number one highway, under Obasanjo's administration, Yar'Adua administration, Jonathan's administration, and Buhari's administration. 4 administrations, and we can complete 110 kilometers highway. Joshua, I think we just leave it there for this morning. I don't have anything else to say. Let's leave it there for tonight, for this morning. Thank you so much, Joshua Davison from Vertiba Capital Management. See you next time. Have a great day and the rest of the week.